we do not understand, we will stigmatize.
What you can see is the remaining of the tanker that exploded.
He suffered equally confessed.
A 500 naira they collect am.
If you no talk, then go beat you.
Now 2,500 they pay.
Another mass abduction. Dozens of students kidnapped at a school in Zamfara State.
Cabinet reshuffle. President Muhammadu Buhari asked 2 ministers to go.
And off the press, it's a review of today's newspapers coming up this morning. Good morning and welcome to a very, wet and rainy Thursday morning here in Lagos. This is PlusTvAfrica and, of course, The Breakfast. I am Osao Gie Ogbonwa. Thanks for joining us.
And I am Annette Felix saying good morning to you and thank you for making us part of your very beautiful Thursday, the second day in the month of September. And I wish this month was starting off on a very good note, but sadly it's not. And that's because while students of Government Day School in Kaya, Maradun local government area in Zamfara State were sitting for their exams, I'm very sure their focus really was on just, making all A's if possible. Only to see that at 11 a.m., while in that exam hall, terrorists, armed bandits basically blocked the road leading to that school, started shooting sporadically into the air to scare people, went in there, grabbed the students and made away on motorcycles. Now, sources say over 300 students, go to that school, and people have said over 100 were kidnapped. But the official figure we've gotten from the police state command in Zamfara State is that 73 students are missing. Now, an ex-councillor in Zamfara State had 4 of his daughters who attend the school kidnapped as well. I mean, it's just terrible what we've seen happen in Zamfara. Lots of response from people. The Arewa Consultative Forum really have spoken, criticized this. And while this kidnap was happening, the state governor, Bello Metawale, was actually at a prayer meeting. And there at that prayer meeting, he was basically telling Zamfara State residents to take up arms and defend themselves. I have quotes for you. Now, Zamfara State Governor Metawale said, "I am calling on the people of the state, particularly those in rural areas, to use all the available weapons at their disposal and protect themselves whenever the bandits attack their villages." Metawale went on to say, "As from today, you should come out en masse and face the bandits if they come to your villages." He also said, "Do not sleep in the night. If you get any information the bandits are coming to your communities to attack you, try to ambush them with all weapons in your possession." Now, I'll quickly talk a bit about our next top trending story linking to this. Now, we know that when it comes to arming the military, there's been lots of lapses from the federal government, lots that have even been admitted by the president himself, with millions of naira budgeted for the sale or for the purchase of arms diverted. We know that already. So if a whole military is so grossly underfunded and they have, insufficient weapons to fight terrorists with all the training that they have, how then does a governor plan for it to work out for citizens who have no combat training? And what weapons exactly would they lay their hands on to not sleep at nights, get information about bandits' arrival or planned attack, and set an ambush for them? help me explain this, but that's really what's top trending this morning.
Well, before I get to the part where, I'm going to obviously say that this is like clockwork, and this is, this happens every 4 AK market days. Once they release a set, they take a new set. And it's happening all over the north, and this, there's a lot of questions, for years now, we've wondered how it's possible to kidnap 200 people. And it's not kidnapping them, or holding them hostage in their location. This is taking them to a totally different location. So how possible is it, and how easy is it that in Nigeria today you can take 100 people and just disappear?
On motorcycles?
Whatever, motorcycles, on skateboards,
How many
whatever you
motorcycles
choose.
would you carry to
So they obviously
kidnap
have a lot
over
of these
73
motorcycles.
people?
And if you listen to some of the demands when they kidnap, motorcycles are some of the things that they ask for as ransom. So it would always be mind-boggling for every Nigerian to understand how possible it is that you can take 100 people and disappear. So there is that part. What roads do they pass through? How do they get to their hideouts and nobody knows where they are or sees them with these 73, according to a news report, or 100? These are things that, are very, very hard to understand. But, we should have, I think by now we should have gotten to, to understand that the picture that has been painted with regard to security is very far from what the reality is in these states because of how easy it is to pull these things off. It basically tells you that there is almost zero security in these regions. And these bandits are really just enjoying themselves, taking charge of whatever they choose to do, doing whatever they choose. There's no police, there's no NSCDC, there's some of the people who are down here in the south running wild. They almost don't exist in Zamfara, in Katsina, or in Borno. They don't. There's obviously no NSCDC or the Nigerian police. They keep relying on the army. So there is that. In response to Governor Matawale asking people to defend themselves, I also would think that we've gotten to that stage already. And it's also important that the people of Zamfara and people of northern Nigeria start, and unfortunately this sounds like anarchy. It sounds very much like everybody's just going to run wild and we're looking for a Bakassi boy type of situation here. We're looking for, a militarization of every part of northern Nigeria. But because it's hard to believe that you can, when people say, oh, they don't know who these bandits are, that's impossible and that's not true. If Sheikh Gumi could walk into these places and speak with these people, it means that they know who they are. They're probably members of their community or members of a close-by community that are carrying out these attacks. And so I think it's also important, yes, it might not be lawful, as Governor Matawale is suggesting, to defend yourselves, and it's almost not impossible because these people don't have any military training, they don't have any combat training either. All they have are cutlasses and hoes that they use for their farming. But we should get to that place where people can now say enough is enough. And I'm sorry how it sounds, but enough is enough. You cannot continue to do this. If the governor or the government security agencies have all failed and don't exist, then enough is enough. And if we see a person that we know has links to these people, we would hold that person in the south here.
So basically you're saying
up,
that some form of action on the
side of the people. I'm thinking that's where we are. There has to be some action. I heard the police or the army, I think it was 2 days ago in the paper saying, telling people of Plateau State to stay away from self-defense or, some of all of that. But I don't think those people have a choice anymore. I think if you have 1,000 people in a community, 200 bandits, yes, they might be armed with AK-47s, maybe it's 50 of them, but 1,000 young men in the community should be able to storm any location. At this point, it doesn't make any sense, and it's very, very risky.
Where you're coming from.
And the people who have been kidnapped are at risk. I get all of that, but we have to get to a place where it is now, we've reached a breaking point, where we push to the wall too much, and we can no longer just sit back and hope that
I
the government will
think
come
really
in.
it's just be sending people to the slaughter. If people are asked to gather themselves in mass and invade the bandits' hideout.
Yeah, well, that's why I mentioned it.
You can't take a knife to a gunfight because these people have yams. They would simply just fire and just waste those people. So I think what we should focus on doing, if we had an ideal structure in place where the government works, is for people to come out and demand protection constitutionally, which is protesting. That should be the constitutional and the democratic way to go about it. That's in an ideal society, right?
Yes,
so it's unfortunate where we are.
We're obviously not in an ideal society, and you have also seen, and this is one of the parts that maybe hurts every Nigerian the most, that if the people of Zamfara tomorrow come out and say we're protesting against the failure of government to protect us, the same government would have police
clamp down
ready
on them.
to clamp down on those protesters. They will have readily armed police with tear gas canisters and whatnot, batons, readily. You know,
and you ask, where are these men when the terrorists came?
Absolutely. And so that's one of the most painful parts of the whole picture that we've painted. And once again, the truth and the honest picture of what exactly we're dealing with regard to security needs to be told. So it's easier for us to understand why government is failing. Is there no police command in Zamfara State? Is there no NSCDC? Is there no DSS office? Aren't these things available in those places?
Quickly moving on to our next top trending story, we're talking about also about security. So first of all, Falana, senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, has written to President Muhammadu Buhari over soldiers jailed for mutiny. Here's the story. In 2014, these soldiers were actually found guilty of rebelling against the authorities in their division in Maiduguri, Borno State. They were subsequently convicted, and their offense, according to Falana, how he's described it, is that they only demanded to be armed against the battle, with these terrorists. So the soldiers were then, earlier sentenced to death, but that was in 2015. But Falana was able to argue and push the case for the death sentence to be commuted to 10 years imprisonment by the military authorities. Now, in this letter that Falana has written to President Muhammadu Buhari, he's arguing for three things. The first thing, he mentioned that the president himself admitted in an interview to the BBC Hausa service on December 28, 2015, that the government had sent the soldiers to the battlefield without arms and ammunition to prosecute the war, and that was what led them to the mutiny, and that they were arrested and detained because they were sent really to a battlefront without arms. Falana also argued that a sum of $2.1 billion and 643 billion naira that were set aside for the purchase of equipment for the counter-insurgency operations was diverted by military officers. He also said that the government and some state governments had recently been granting pardon to repentant Boko Haram terrorists and had been rehabilitating hundreds of terrorists who had waged war against Nigeria and subjected citizens to abuse and human rights degradation. He said that if these terrorists who have committed grave offenses can be forgiven and pardoned, rehabilitated, then these soldiers who were convicted for mutiny for demanding weapons to fight terrorists should be granted pardon and rehabilitated by the federal government. It's a strong argument there. So really, links to what I mentioned earlier, sending people to the war front to fight without arms. These people have more sophistication regarding training. God knows how they get that. More sophistication regarding funding. And then the people you give millions of naira and billions of dollars to purchase arms, then steal that money. Nothing is done about that. And then the people who come out to complain that they're being sent to fight without arms, they're now being accused of mutiny and would be, put to death or, stay in jail for 10 years. It really doesn't seem like what is good for the goose, is good for the gander here.
Yeah, and I think it was a couple of years ago that I spoke with a soldier who had just returned from the north, and and he made similar statements. He said that he basically, the picture over there, he had lost a couple of colleagues. He showed me a few wounds on his knee that he was able to recover from. The picture that he painted basically was that it feels like you're fighting yourself, according to him. You're in battlefield and it feels like they're sending you out there to fight yourself, because the same people that you're going to fight, have been told, according to him, well, once again, have been told, that you're coming. The same people that you are going, and so you're every time,
so
you're
you're
going
saying
out.
the bandits have superior intelligence about the arrival of
according
the
to
military.
to him, and it may
When it
not
should be the other way around.
It may not be, true in every single picture, but we've also heard of, leaked information. We've heard of, insiders and some of all of those rumors from President Goodluck Jonathan had said that, the members of Boko Haram in his government. I remember he said that, but when you hear of things like this, you know, it's not really as shocking as it should be, because there have been similar stories. When this thing happened in 2014, I remember, you know, this story very well. They had complained that, you know, of the same things, that they weren't armed properly, and it felt like every time that they were going out to die. And so some of the soldiers basically protested against their superiors, and, you know, that's how they ended up. But Femi Falana has a very, very strong point. If you can forgive the same terrorists who have committed these atrocities against the Nigerian state for the last decade, then you might as well forgive soldiers who basically haven't done anything aside protest that they needed more weapons. One thing that we've lacked in the last couple of decades also is a proper auditing with the funding for the fight against insecurity. Yes, I remember Sambo Dasuki had been incarcerated in 2015 for mismanagement of funds, $2 billion or so. But after that, there have been billions and billions and billions of dollars, or naira, that have been pumped into, you know, weapons and ammunition and funding for the fight against insecurity, and yet we still aren't winning the war. So why isn't the Nigerian government asking these questions? Yesterday was in the news that $500 million was spent on 12 Tucano or Super Tucano jets. How do we have that much money to spend on jets, but we can't buy AK-47s and buy, you know, other, you know, smaller equipment in the fight against insurgency? So when we become honest with ourselves, and we become, you know, a state that truly wants to be honest with the fight against insecurity, then we probably would win, you know, the war, would be closer to winning the war. Until then, we're going to continue with this dance in the market, and it's never going to make sense to anybody. And yes, I agree with Femi Falana. If you will, pardon people who have murdered hundreds and thousands of Nigerians, you may as well pardon those soldiers who haven't necessarily committed any crime, aside protesting against their superiors, which, yes, in military parlance is wrong. But, yeah.
That's it on Top Trending this morning. Let's take a break and return to analyze the papers on Off the Press.
Businesses in Africa can be very challenging. In Nigeria, it is particularly intimidating, and successful builders have learned how to navigate a hostile environment to unlock opportunities. But one major challenge businesses face is how to filter through the noise and identify where their ideal customers exist. Get insight and practical steps from industry players and captains of industries. Hear success stories to help you make informed decisions as you scale your business in Nigeria. Watch Business Insights at this time on PlusTvAfrica.
Hello and welcome. It's Nimasa This Week, the voice of maritime. Nimasa This Week is brought to you by the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency. Statutorily mandated to ensure that there is regulation and promotion of matters affecting our waters. NIMASA bears responsibility for search and rescue, shipping development, and ship registration.
NIMASA This Week, the voice of maritime, showing on this channel.
Nigeria's Niger Delta region, from where the black gold fuels Africa's largest economy, where the lines between wealth and poverty has never been thinner. Conflicts, poverty, insecurity, and environmental challenges daily confront the region. How can the Niger Delta story be changed for the better?
Join Mamude Akuga at 9 p.m. every Friday evening on PlusTvAfrica as he probes deep in search of solutions.
Inside the Niger Delta with Mamude Akuga, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region.
What we do not understand, we will stigmatize.
What you can see is the remaining of the tanker that exploded.
The suspect equally confessed.
A 500 naira they collect am.
If you no talk, then go beat you.
Now 2,500 they pay.
You're welcome back to the breakfast on Plus TV Africa. It's now time for Off the Press, the segment where we take a look at the headlines in the country. Let's begin with the Punch newspaper. The headline reads, 73 Zamfara students abduction. Arawa Consultative Forum, ACF, fumes as government tells residents to fight back. Gunmen in broad daylight block roads, abduct ex-councillor's 4 daughters, others. ACF faults self-defense call, says government that can't protect citizens has no reason to exist. Matawale advises communities to use any weapon at their disposal and come out en masse. Conflicting judgments, 6 chief judges appear before NJC today. Sacked ministers fail to meet target, Buhari plans more evaluation. NLC threatens industrial action over proposed electricity tariff hike. Remittances, Senate accuses NNPC, CBN, others of underpayment. PDP crisis worsens, word suspends seconders. APC upholds Abiodun Loyalist Congress, ignores Amosu Group. Ekiti community protests couple, others kidnapped. Bandits demand 10 million naira. Security agents bar Alafin Olubadan from Lekon Salami Stadium inauguration. And lastly, Rep says the EFCC is helping customs to recover 10.6 billion naira.
All right. Moving on to the Daily Independent newspapers. Bandits invade Zamfara governor's hometown, abduct over 100 students, kill 9, scores injured in Kogi community, abduct couple and 2 others in Ekiti. Residents protest. And 3 lawmakers escape death in Nasarawa. Also on the Daily Independent, Senate accuses CBN of withholding 80% operational surplus from Federation account. Amnesty assessment of Nigerian government, mere ranting and biased, says the presidency. Don't set Nigeria ablaze with hate speech, federal government warns leaders. And also why Buhari reshuffled cabinet, sacked Agric and power ministers. Restructuring, devolution of power would resolve security problems and end agitation, says Iwanyawu. And we can also find here, would resist planned increase in electricity tariff, NLC vows. Finally, on the Daily Independent, COVID-19 vaccination, Obaseki threatens another lockdown, says government will act to protect people.
Moving now to the Nation newspaper, the headline is an explainer into why Buhari fired power agriculture ministers. Ondo doctors call off 3-month strike. Ihikwazu is WHO assistant DG. 73 pupils kidnapped in Zamfara. Government shuts schools. Lagos candidates tops UTME results with 358. NDA yet to find kidnapped army officer 1 week after. Senate panel, CBN disagree on remittance of revenue surplus. Benefits of my administration will be felt after my exit, says Buhari. PDP crisis, Secondus ready to withdraw his case.
All right, now moving from the Daily Independent, let's see what we can find on the leadership newspapers. First time in 6 years, PMB wields big stick on 2 cabinet ministers, or 2 cabinet members, I beg your pardon. Power, Greek ministers fired for underperformance and flip-flop policies. More ministers to go. Citizens hard hit as food inflation rises from 13.7% to 21%. Power supply worsens. Experts set agenda for new ministers. And the PDP says the president's action won't change anything. IPOB has amassed weapons and bombs, says the presidency. Still in the news, bandits strike in Zamfara, abduct 100 students in Matawale's hometown. CBN appoints Wansinobi and 7 others as departmental directors. I think that's really all we can find on the leadership this morning. Good morning to Mr. Nyayatok.
Good morning.
Always pleasure to be on Plus TV Africa.
Thanks for joining us. There's a couple of very big stories in the headlines this morning. I'm not sure which you would like to start from, the kidnapping of 100 students or the cabinet reshuffle.
Let's start with the kidnapping of the 100 students.
Well, just for a minute, in the states, the state government and the state police command have said officially it's 73. So other figures of over 100 are currently unverified.
You know, it's so disheartening. The Bible talks about a man that had 100 sheep, not human beings, sheep. And one sheep was missing, one. And he left the 99 and went in search of the one sheep that was missing. Nigeria, we are not talking sheep, we are not talking cattle, we are talking of human beings. And there is, oh no, it wasn't 200, it was just 150. No, it wasn't 150. It was, and these are mind-boggling figures. Not one human being, not 5, not 10, not 50. They are saying, no, it wasn't 100 and something, it was just 70 something. Human souls. It's disheartening, the extent to which we have allowed human life to be so cheap, such that it's like 2 a penny. We were in this country when one American, was within our environment, and we saw what the American government did. They went out of their way and rescued that one American. On a daily basis, we are losing Nigerians in scores, in tens, if not in hundreds, on a daily basis. I think the time has come when we really need to sit down. And I was listening to your analysis before time, and I could feel Osa as he was making certain very hard statements, and you were not too comfortable with it. But let's face this issue. If you have cancer, that cancer is either excised or it spreads. I do not know if we understand what is going on in our country with respect to these terrorists, that we are using perfume to get sexy with them and call them bandits. How long is it going to take for the federal government to wake up? And look at the North. The North is we're talking of, there's such a terrible contradiction in this country, I don't understand. Let power go to the North, power to the North, power to the... We keep talking about power to the North. Do these Northerners, with all due respect, my brothers and my sisters and brothers in it, do they really care about the people? Does development really count? Does the life of the people really matter to these people that represent the North? Because, so my best friend, I attended a federal government college, so understandably, my worldview is different. My 2 children are married. I have 2 boys. They are both married to the North. I have 2 boys. They are both married to the North. Their wives are from the North. And it really bothers me if they really care about the fact that education is the future of any people and that these people cannot go to school. Did they really sit down and think of the larger implication, the prognosis of what is going on today? Not just human life, even the development, the Admajiri boys. What is the plan, the policy of government for these young people who are fellow Nigerians? All I'm hearing is, oh, power to the North, power to the North. As a matter of fact, the one person that stood up for these Almajiris was a Southerner, President Goodluck Jonathan. He took it as, look, one of my friends, very, very good friend, he was contesting election in the North, governorship, and he said he's not going to win. I asked him why. He said because his policies, he attended King's College. So he thinks in terms of development, he thinks in terms of human resource, he sees the human resource, and he thinks in terms of going to disrupt the system so that the children can have a future like his children. And he says he's going to go against the establishment. And as a result, they are going to go out of their way to stop him. That was the most irrational thing I've heard in my life. But that was a sad reality. So I want the youth of the North to really sit down and ask themselves very, very serious question. Is there a difference between politics and development? And if there is, Which of the lines are they going to go with? Even if somebody must come from the north, what should be the criteria? What should be the quality of such a person? This issue of religion and divide, oh, he's a Christian, how does that affect the price of Gari in the market? If a Muslim can come and give me a good country, so be it.
Well, Mr.
If a Christian can give you a better future and secure you, so be it. What do you really want?
All right. Mr. Ayatok, let's move away from there. We'll revisit that conversation later on the show this morning. But let's now also talk about some other very big story, and that is the cabinet reshuffle. The president has sacked the Minister of Power and the Minister of Agric, Saleh Maman and Sabo Nanono, and replaced them with two others. Mohamed Mahmoud, who's Minister for Environment before, now takes over as Minister of Power, and then Abubakar Liu, who was Minister of State for Works and Housing, takes over as Agriculture Minister. Do you see this as a great step by the current administration?
In a sense, yes. In a sense that just the animation of the fact that you underperformed, just that animation is likely to get others to sit up, because Mr. President had come to this point where, something has to make you to do something. My mother used to tell me that the child that never has anything to fear never amounts to anything in life. That's what my mother used to tell me. The child that has nothing to fear never amounts to anything. You got to know that your boss will not take certain things. Oh, I trust you. Oh, I trust them. Oh, I know them. Oh, I trust them. 6 years, you trust them, and we become the poverty capital of the world. 6 years, we will become one of the top 3 most terrorized nations in the world. 6 years, you trust them. Doesn't make sense to me. So for me, better late than never. On the positive, I'll say yes, that animation alone will definitely make people to sit up. It will also bring about conversations on excellence or performance within the polity, because people are now starting to, discuss, and they will now start to do analysis of others. They will ask, this environment ministry that has been given a bigger role to play in agriculture, is it out of excellent performance in the Ministry of Environment? Can we really do an analysis of the Ministry of Environment and find that the minister is smelling like a rose, on account of which he's going to be given agriculture, which is one of the mainstays of our economy? So these are questions that we must ask. Minister of State Housing, that happens to be my area. And I think I will, for reason of propriety and wisdom, withhold my comment on that area. But my prayer is that these people will see their new assignment as a mark of confidence in them. And the worst thing they can do to their boss is to make Nigerians feel that the president didn't know what he was doing. But if they come up and really hit the ground running, we will be able to hail the president. That's the least they can do to their boss.
Well, the current administration has just about 2 years, before a new government comes in. So I'm not sure how fast they can actually hit the ground, or which ground they would hit in the next, between now and 2023. But I also want to ask you, how long would you take to make a change if you see that certain persons aren't working in a company or in an organization? From your perspective, would it take you a whole year or 2 years or 5 or 6?
You see, I'll tell you this. I've been so close to government without ever taking up any government appointments. Every government in my state, starting with Obongata, I was one of the closest to him. Coming to my brother Akpabio, extremely close to him. Coming to Mr. Udom, I know the system, and I keep making an advice. Number one, in your first term, pretend you don't have a second term. Work so hard, so bad, and let your performance speak for you. When you get into second term, know that it is exit that matters. And if I had my way, if I'm a governor by the grace of God, by the end of the first year in office, I'd already had 6 years. Those who I would have already had 5 years, those that performed well over the period, I'll retain them. But now on your first year, at the end, start what we call a finishing team. This finishing team are people who are not going to look for office, number one. Number two, there are people who are very competent because by now it's no longer maybe, maybe not. Look at your priority areas. Within the past 5 years, you would have had people that you say they are stars. Bring them to your legacy ministries. You're not going to be able to achieve everything. Those hardcore performers, bring them to your legacy ministries where you want to have what you may call what you should be remembered for, your legacies. And you are not going to do that 2 years to go because election would have started by that time. Right now, Mr. President has waited so late. By the end of this year, one of the ministers that was appointed, I told somebody I could never accept to be appointed a minister 2 years to the end of an administration. I wouldn't accept it. The reason is that in the ministries, there's what they call managing the boss. At that time, they know that you're on your way out and there's no second term. So there's no fear of you. They can manage you, they can play you. Before you know, they are looking for file. Before you know, you bring up a memo, they call it managing the boss. They manage you to exit you. They don't fear you. They can actually ignore you. So when you come up now as a minister, number one is that the civil servants don't take you serious because they know you're on your way out. Number two is that the politicians are starting business and their own is like, guy, get us money for election, get us money for election. So they are not thinking in terms of development for you. They are thinking in terms of putting pressure on you to bring out money for election. So at the end of the day, you discover that you achieve next to nothing. That is a sad reality in Nigeria and it's a cycle that I hope we can break. So the ministry's staff are not going to be listening to these new ministers. They're just going to manage them and blah, blah, blah. And you're just coming in as a new person. You want to start to study to understand what is going on. You're not going to find the information you need that is important. They're not going to give it to you. And secondly, those things you want to hit the ground running to achieve things, politicians are not going to allow you. They're like, my guy, election is coming. Election is coming. Don't let us lose. They will put such terrible pressure on you that you'll be so distracted. So I don't see much that this is what we're going to do. You should have done this at least a year ago before politics started and when the civil servants still knew that you have a little bit of time. Right now, they know you don't have time. So they're going to manage you. They're going to tell you things that are sexy. They're going to show you areas you can make small money here and there. And if you want to look at areas that you must stop them so that things that go right don't frustrate you. And by the end of the day, you achieve nothing.
Okay, so finally, I want us to ponder on this important question, if the president is understood. Because he's been speaking recently and he's been saying that the full impact of his administration would only be felt after. And that he's not been out for shortcuts, but he's been taking the due diligence and making sure that his projects have long-term benefits. So do we misunderstand the president when we criticize him?
The former president, Jonathan, said, when I leave office, you people not going to miss me. Oh. You understand me? He said it. And the jury is out there. Are we missing him or not? Mr. President has said that the full impact of what I'm doing will be felt when I leave office. Now, that could be positive. It could be negative. The dead body is going to be felt when he leaves office. I'm telling you, it's going to be felt when he leaves office. The terrorists that have been emboldened, when he leaves office and another person comes in, there can be peace in this country within 4 to 6 months. Take that to the bank. There can be peace in this country within 4 to 6 months. Of somebody who comes in and says enough is enough. That nonsense is going to stop. Because of the body language that we are talking about is somebody who says, look, I'm not taking this nonsense anymore. So the full impact of Mr. President, romancing, well, seemingly, let me be careful to recount it, seemingly romancing on account of which this was becoming so emboldened and so brazen in their approach to ravaging this nation. The full impact will be felt after he's left office. It is after he's left office that we'll know whether these terrorists were afraid of him or they were emboldened by him. But there are also certain things that he's done that the full impact in government. There are certain foundations that you lay that the result will not come immediately. And Nigerians also have to learn to not put undue pressure on administrations for here and now. In the Bible, there's a statement that is recorded, and I think we should understand that in government. It says, Paul sowed, Apollos watered, on account of which God ultimately gave the increase. There needs to be a very good communication, and I blame this on the Minister of Communication, not just communication, information, because he needs to let us know that these are foundations for a 4-story building or foundations for a skyrise, which is going to be like maybe 20 floors or 50 floors, and that this foundation is going to take 4 years to lay, just foundation. When people know that and you come to build a superstructure, they don't give the credit to only you that has built the superstructure they can see. They give the credit to the man who laid the foundation on account of which the superstructure is being built. But Nigerians is like, I want to build bridge, build roads. When you invest in education, imagine that you invest in the primary education now. You're not going to see the effect until they get into secondary school, which is going to be like 6 years after when you're on your way back. Even the secondary school will not too much show until they get into university, which is going to be like over 10 years or thereabout, which is far above the span of your 2 sessions. But when we know that a solid foundation is being laid, we'll be able to appreciate when the person leaves office.
All right. Thank you very much, Ezekiel Nyayatok.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this Thursday morning. We wish you a very interesting day ahead. And good morning once again.
Same to you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right. Stay with us. Today in History is coming up right after this short break. I'm going back to the year 1968 to tell you a little bit about the Nigerian Civil War.
And I'm going to the year 2013 to tell you about a record-breaking swim. Stay with us.
For upcoming artists to blow in Nigeria.
Welcome to Plus Trending. I am Booking November, your host, saying thank you for joining us on today's episode.
Welcome back. It's tea time on PlusTvAfrica.
Practice makes perfect. I'm not perfect yet, but I'm a lot better than I used to be.
He's a king. He's entitled to marry 100 if he wants to.
It is engagement we need to have.
Those who suffer miscarriages are never taken into account.
Members of the National Assembly are also influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the barbing, I pay my rent. On the barbing, I send my children to school.
A consultative engagement.
No any tangible notification before they ban us.
It's one thing for people to be at your back and the heat of the moment, and another thing for them to still be with you when push comes to shove.
I will do everything to take Lagos out of the national grid.
Great to have you back on The Breakfast here on Plus TV Africa. Now let's go back a little bit in history. The 2nd of September, I'm going back to the year 1968. The incident I'm sharing with you today lasted between September 2nd, 1968 to the 15th of October, also in 1968. It was called the OAU invasion, and it eventually led to the loss of about 25,000 lives on both sides, the Nigerian military side and, of course, the Biafran side. It was 12 days, basically, of house-to-house fire when the Nigerian military tried to invade what is today called southeastern Nigeria and take charge of certain cities. It was 12 days, like I said, of continued bombardment, and Biafran soldiers eventually surrendered on the 14th of September after this started today. It was, of course, carried out by the Nigerian 3rd Marine Commando Division, and that was against the Biafran 12th Division. Biafran soldiers were able to retain control of Umuahia and eventually, take back Owerri and Aba in all of this, that happened. But eventually then, lost the city and, surrendered a few months later. In the months, after today's, events, they also, tried every now and then to attack the Nigerian army, Nigerian military side, to try and get back some of these cities. But sometimes, weren't successful because they were greatly outnumbered. There was also, of course, the parts where there was already the food blockade, to parts of the Biafran side. And so it made it difficult to also, carry out a war and win the war. But, this day was the day that the Operation OAU began during the Nigerian Civil War, September 2nd, 1968.
And 15 January 1970, the war officially ended after 30 months of fighting. Over 1 million people died during that Nigerian Civil War. A very grim time in our history, but thank God that's behind us now.
Absolutely.
2013, on this day in history, September the 2nd, history was made. A woman known as Diane Nyad, she was 64 years old. She made a record-breaking swim from Cuba to Florida. She had tried 4 times, and people had been trying to swim and break that record from Cuba to Florida since the year 1950. She had tried 4 times, she failed, and she said she obviously went into retirement, but came back later to say, I'm going to try again. So for the 5th time, she stood overlooking those, Cuban waters, and she decided to dare. She worked with a team of experts, scientists, and for the first time, she went without a shark tank because the water from Cuba to Florida was filled with sharks and jellyfishes that actually bit her so bad she had to abandon the swimming expedition one of the times in the past. But in this day in history, she became the first person to swim from Cuba to Florida without the use of a shark cage for protection. It was a 110-mile swim, and it happened in approximately 53 hours. Imagine swimming for 53 hours. And she said all the time, what helped her through was she just saying she could do it, she could do it, she could do it, telling herself that she could do it and humming her favorite songs in her head. Wearing a bodysuit, gloves, wearing booties, wearing a special mask to protect her from jellyfish. She braved the seas and broke that record at the age of 64.
It is a mind-blowing record, mostly because of her age. And another thing, it really tells is that once you put your mind to something, there's absolutely nothing that a human being cannot, achieve or cannot do. Once you're able to create that, personality in your head and you're able to put your mind to it, you will be able to do it. But something else that that is interesting about this is one of the things that I've always pointed out, and this is also from the Olympics, when you see certain, people who have won gold medals or won medals at the Olympics, even from Tokyo, is the thing that makes people want to emigrate to certain places, to the United States, is because the society gives you a place where you can achieve being a professor and at the same time be an Olympian. You can be a teacher in a school and at the same time be a gymnast, and win records in the Olympics. That's what the society gives you. But here in Nigeria, there's a lot of great swimmers in the Niger Delta that would not dare, things like, they don't even remember that there's possibility of breaking records, swimming through the creeks in the Niger Delta. That's the difference in both societies.
Yes, information is power. So once you're exposed to possibilities, knowing that there are people who have done these things and they can see that it's possible, then definitely.
And also living in an environment that gives you the space to be who you want to be and live the life to your fullest. That's really what it is. We don't have a lot of that here. We're just trying to get food and get paid at the end of the month and feed our families. Anyway.
But Diana Nyad broke that record on this day in history, 2013.
Absolutely. All right, we're moving into our first major conversation for today, and that is the cabinet reshuffle by President Muhammadu Buhari. He has fired 2 ministers, the Minister of Power and Agriculture, and replaced them. Of course, it has been described as, steps being taken because they were underperforming ministers. This morning, we are speaking with Mark Adebayo, who is a public affairs analyst, and Mr. Ayodele Adio, who is the managing director of the Avalon here in Nigeria. Good morning to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right. Mr. Adebayo, I'll start with you. I want to get your thoughts on this story generally. When you heard, the news that these 2 people have been fired, do you see this as great news in the steps towards achieving, better for Nigeria?
Well, my first impression was that, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is constitutionally empowered to appoint ministers and to relieve them of their appointments. He has the power of hire and fire over all his appointees. So, but critically speaking, for me, it's a non-event. But it is something that I only hope that those he's replacing them with would do something better. Well, in the area of the Minister of Power, for instance, it's difficult to be able to point out at any achievement, any sterling performance that he has been able to achieve since he came into office. What we have seen is that for the last 2 years, 4 years, even before he came into office, electricity tariff has been increased by about 400% without corresponding deliverables to Nigerians. You don't see power is far and in between. There is no deliverable. There's no, the issue of power in Nigeria is like it's degenerating by the day in the area of generation, in the area of distribution. So there was nothing the Minister of Power did that couldn't have warranted him being relieved of his appointment. In the area of agriculture, you would discover that food is extremely expensive now. When as a family man, where you used to put 20,000 naira down, now you have to put something like 50 to 60,000 naira for upkeep, for just to buy food for 1 week is extremely expensive. So a lot of hunger in the land, which is causing a lot of hunger. But for me, the president did not go far enough. The president did not go far enough. Okay, what do you say about the health minister? Now, the National Association of Resident Doctors of Nigeria have been on strike for about 3 or so weeks now. Hundreds of Nigerians have died because of that. And right here in our shores, right there in our country, right there in the Federal Capital Territory, Nigerian doctors in their hundreds were queuing up to get job from another country, Saudi Arabia. I mean, it tells you that the Nigerian health sector is in crisis. What is that minister still doing there? Now, we have a minister that has been alleged, to have, terrorism sympathy, who is still in the government. I was thinking that those ministers should go. The health minister, the communication minister, because once there's a serious allegation against you like that, you have to go. So the reshufflement did not go far enough. The president needs to look at critical area. Look at the area of defense, which is responsible for our security. The president should look critical. Everybody involved in the security management of this country ought to be replaced.
Okay, Mr. Adebayo. Let's quickly bring in Mr. Adio to get your initial reaction to this cabinet reshuffle by the president.
I think it was a very important move by the president because these were 2 ministries that have quite frankly been underperforming in the last 2 years. Now, if you talk about the agricultural sector, Mr. Adebayo alluded to the fact that food prices have been skyrocketing. Of course, that is not directly the fault of the minister, but you would have expected some strategic response from that ministry in terms of certain policies and initiatives that would have driven the agricultural sector forward, which did not happen. You would realize that in the last few years, the agricultural sector has been the engine of growth of our economy. It's been growing steadily over the last few years. But in recent times, the agricultural sector has been shrinking. In fact, in the last 2 years, our economy has enjoyed a boost largely from the information technology sector, whereas the agricultural sector has been shrinking. So it points clearly that there's a problem with the leadership in that particular sector. So to that extent, it seemed like a very sensible decision for me. On the part of the power sector, I mean, it's clear to everyone. In 2017, the former Minister of Power had initiated some sort of a strategic roadmap called the Power Sector Recovery Plan, which, amongst other things, was to do 3 critical things, which was to increase power supply, to make the sector more robust and attractive to private sector investment, and to make the sector financially viable. And that roadmap was to run up to 2021, such that even the World Bank was willing to provide a counterpart funding of $2.5 billion. Unfortunately, when this new minister came in, the biggest mistake he did was not to stick to that particular roadmap and decided to reinvent the wheel and pursue policies that were counter to the roadmap that had been laid on the ground. And what did that give us? That continued to give us frequent grid collapses, higher electricity tariff, and very little results to show for it. But thankfully, the president has found the courage to do the right thing, even though many would argue it's coming at the 8th day of the week. But thankfully, he's done the right thing. And we can only hope that the 2 people that have been replaced in those both ministries will chart the course forward.
Well, we'll get to talk about that, and also look at these 2 people who are replacing the ones fired and seeing how much, they've also performed, where they're coming from. But, Mr. Adio, there's something, that I feel, and I've said here before that, a lot of times we don't have, actual indices for rating the performance of people in government. And that includes, not just ministers and everybody who's in charge of any MDA, even, governors and presidents themselves. There's no actual indices for rating, how they perform. So I want you to share your thoughts on how you rate a performing minister. In what ways can you properly rate a performing minister? And how long should it take before a government realizes this person doesn't seem to be doing well enough? It's time to make a change.
Well, I would argue that there are standard ways to evaluate people who hold political offices. The only difference is that because usually political office is more emotional, and once you connect to people emotionally, you blur the lines of how to really evaluate you in terms of the work that you have done on the ground. But, to the extent of the question that you've asked, I think there are clear ways to evaluate a minister. One is first the strategic agenda and the policy direction that the ministry sets. How clear that vision is, what the objectives are, and how achievable those objectives are. You also have to look at how well that ministry had implemented that plan, and consequently, the results of the policies that that particular minister had pursued over that critical period of time. And so you are able to assess that, given the context of the budgetary allocation available to that particular ministry. So for instance, in the power sector, you can measure it by the amount of investments that have come into the private sector to improve transmission capacity, to improve generation capacity, to improve distribution capacity. You can measure that with the amount of electricity supply that the average Nigerian now has. You can evaluate that by how cheap and affordable the power supply is, especially for the manufacturing sector, to be able to produce and become globally competitive. So there are clear indices for which you can evaluate certain ministries or departments of government. The only problem is that people like to be a lot more emotional than they are at looking at the numbers. And if we look closely at the numbers, you will see that these particular 2 ministers have dropped the ball. And if you went to the streets in Yaba or in TBS or anywhere in Lagos, and you put a microphone on anybody's mouth, they will tell you clearly that there have been a problem with these two ministries, and the results are clear for everyone to see that they have quite underperformed. And it's a courageous thing for the president to do a quick substitute to see if they can salvage.
In about 20 seconds, how long would you expect a change to be made when a minister is underperforming?
Well, I mean, that's quite a difficult question, but I think that a 4-year period, I would argue that a 4-year period is enough for you to implement an idea and to see it to fruition. A 4-year time will be a sensible time.
Okay, let's bring in Mr. Adebayo now. We know that Nigeria needs about 180,000 to about 200,000 megawatts of electricity, of power for us to have stable electricity in Nigeria. But we're currently around 4,000, generating just about 4,000, way under what we need. And when Salim Maman, came into office, he said that he was going to take our power generating capacity to 11,000 megawatts. He then upped that to about 25,000 megawatts. But then we know that we're still highly underperforming. So when we look really at, the gap regarding where we are with power and where we ought to be, what do you think the minister, missed out, what he could have done, to make sure that we close that gap? And is that going to be possible within the next 2 years in power?
Yeah, thank you, Aneta. You see, the issue is that he probably set a bar for himself that he couldn't scale. And it's quite clear that he did not have a strategic plan of execution of the bar that he set for himself. It's like identifying a destination without having a roadmap of how to get to that destination. That was what happened to the Minister of Power. So and of course, as my colleague said, he met a plan on ground, discarded it, and started to begin to reinvent the wheel. I'm aware that a few professionals submitted a robust plan of action to him, which he jettisoned. I know this very well because these professionals, these experts are my friends. They did a thorough job, submitted it to him, and he got it, he thanked them, and discarded it. He never did anything about it. So, meanwhile, the one he met on ground, he refused to implement. So that is a major, that is one of his biggest undoings. And I think when you set a bar for yourself, the best, it's like setting a question if you set a question for yourself, when we were in the university, just for the sake of, maybe for the fun of it, or to discipline students who are not in class, a lecturer comes into class and says, write a question for yourself and answer by yourself. He comes, looks at the class, sees that less than 50% of the students are there. He didn't plan to give you a question before, but he just said, okay, write the question by yourself and answer. It happened to me like twice or so when I was in the university. But how do you now feel a question that you have asked yourself? That is what has happened to the Minister of Power. He set a bar for himself, he set a standard which he was unable to achieve, and that is not good for us. Everybody, look, my son had to put on a generator now. There's no power here. Because you also look at, we may be having maybe 4,000 or 5,000 megawatts being generated. What about the distribution? The distribution level itself is still abysmal. It's still abysmal. We are generating like 4,000 or so, but it is not. How many communities even benefit from that? There are thousands of communities in this country. I read the material of the electricity distribution in this country. I still know that the distribution level is abysmal.
All right.
It's abysmal.
Let's bring back Ayodele Adio. And I want us to go to back all the way back to the foundation of all of this. Mr. Mark Adebayo had mentioned other ministries that he believed needed to feel the same effect, and have replacements done. But Mr. Adio, I want you to go back to the initial selection of ministers and share your thoughts on the persons that were placed in these capacities. Do you feel like the current administration had done a thorough job, or had made the best selection of persons to handle these ministries? And also, are there other ministries that you feel you would rate pretty much the same way you've rated the power and agriculture, and these ministers that have been replaced.
Okay, so if I get the question correctly, you're not talking about the selection of these new ministers. You're talking about the old ministers.
Yeah,
right?
I'm talking about the initial selection, of ministers, for the current administration, and are there other ministries you've also looked at and thought to yourself, this person needs also to go, or these three also need to go?
Yeah, quite frankly, we haven't put square pegs and square holes in many ministries. In fact, it's easier to count the amount of ministers, that are really performing because they won't go past your first hand, and that's the sad reality. And we can go all and all, and you see, it's so bad that there are so many ministers that you can't even remember their name. You don't even know who they are in this particular administration, and it's quite a shame. The minister of Interior, for instance, who is supposed to be in charge of internal security, I think can do a lot more better. I think that the Minister of Labour has been quite shocking in many of the things that he has said and many of the things that he has done, and the way he's handled labor disputes over time. The list is just endless because, and that's why we seem to be where we are, as a country, because there's too many square pegs in a round hole, and the process for which many ministers were giving offices, I think it was more a reward for political loyalty as against competence in a particular role, responsibility that they were given, and that's a sad situation that we find ourselves in.
Yes, Mr. Dio, that point you just mentioned is what I was going to bring up. When we take a look at how appointments are made, especially regarding the cabinet, does it then seem to you that this is something about politics more than competence and professionalism? Because I took a look at the profiles of these, new ministers that have replaced the old ones, and it really doesn't seem to match up with the professions and disciplines of these ministers and where they're coming to. For example, we know that the new minister, Abubakar Aliyu, former Minister of State for Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, is a professional engineer. He's now been brought into the power space. Also, we were seeing that Mahmoud Abubakar specialized in microbiology and, amassed degrees in resources management. He's now coming into agriculture. So are we still having the same mistakes, or are there, lessons that they can, bring over to their new ministries to make it work? Mr. Dio, and then Mr. Adebayo, please.
Okay, so there are two things with people that you appoint to head very big government agencies, organizations. So it's either they have the technical expertise or they have strong administrative competence. And so the real problem happens when they lack both, when they do not have the technical expertise that is required to supervise the ministry, and when they lack administrative competence. Now, if you talk about the two ministers who have just been sworn in or who have just been appointed, I really can't speak for the Minister of Environment because I really do not know his background. I've really not followed anything. But to the former Minister for State for Housing, which I have followed for quite some time. Incidentally, I met him in 2009 when he was the head of the Yobe State Housing Agency. The truth is, I think he's a civil engineer.
Yes,
Yes. So it might not directly, in terms of technical expertise, match the requirement that is required for the power sector. But he's been a seasoned administrator for the past 12, 13, 14 years. And he spent his entire career in government bureaucracies, heading various government agencies at the state level, became deputy governor for about 10 years, and of course, and then Minister for State for Housing and Works and Ministry. So I think that to that extent, and from the few things that I've learned about him over the years, he seems to be a hard worker. He's quite a seasoned administrator. Is likely, let me choose my words carefully, is likely to bring stability to the power sector. And I have the confidence of the fact that because he's worked with the former Minister for Power, who had set up a roadmap for the power ministry before he was relieved of his duties in 2019, he may be more open and willing to continue to pursue the plan or the roadmap that was left behind by the former minister and see that to completion. So if there's anything that gives me confidence, is the slight antecedent of the fact that he's quite a seasoned administrator and might just be willing to follow the laid down plan and procedures on ground.
Okay.
So fundamentally, you just need two things. I think you need the technical expertise. The perfect scenario would be someone who has the technical expertise and the administrative competence. But once you find one of the two, you may just be able to muddle through. But if you have none of the two, then you're going to have yourself in a real pot of soup. Okay,
Mr. Adebayo, I want you to weigh in on this, because when we take a look at the cabinets of other countries, for example, the Joe Biden cabinet, when he announced it, we saw people that he put in, people who are young, vibrant, and people who have ownership and authority of the different sectors that they were plugged in. But it doesn't seem exactly so in Nigeria. How do you react to this regarding, professionalism and basically politics?
Well, you see, the country will not be able to get it right if all we do is the qualifications and considerations for appointing people into office is political or ethno-religious. And that is what has been happening since the inception of this country. There is no deliberate attempt to bring in people with expertise, except in a very few circumstances that we have been able to get this right, like former minister of finance in Nigeria, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. This is a great woman who was brought in and was able to do wonderfully well. You cannot say that for many people. Late Dr. Professor Akuyili, look at what he did in the area of drug management and administration in the country. Except for few occasions like that. We have not been lucky. You have people come in through political consideration, ethno-religious sentiments, for which this government is the most notorious. You understand me? Now, if I were the president, the minister of finance of defense will go because of the spate of insecurity. The minister of health will go because of the health crisis that is not being able to manage well. The minister
Mark Adebayo, can you still hear us? All right, seems we may have lost Mark Adebayo there. Mr. Ayodele Adio, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, well, just before we get Mark Adebayo back.
I think he's back. Okay.
Okay, all right. So just before we get Mark Adebayo back, I want you to, quickly just start with setting agenda for the new ministers. They have about 2 years until a new government comes in, so there's a possibility they might remain or not. But what would you describe as hitting the ground running? In the time that they have. In what ways can they achieve the most with the time that they have left?
Okay, I think they actually even have less than 2 years, and realistically, I really don't know how much time they have to implement anything meaningful, because after 9-10 months it's going to be politics all the way. So I'm not sure they have enough time to implement or achieve anything meaningful. For the power sector, like I said, all the new minister needs to do is to follow the roadmap that was already laid down, which is the power sector recovery plan, and to see to the implementation of some of the areas that have lagged behind over the last 2-3 years. To see that, the counterpart funding from the World Bank, like I said, $2.5 billion comes through, and so many other reforms that were targeted, at expanding the power sector and opening it up to investment, increasing power supply and making the sector more financially viable. Those things need to be done. Yeah, I mean, he might not be able to get carried over the line because it's going to be a short period, but I think it's important for them to begin to implement many of those ideas and initiatives. For the agricultural sector, I would argue that the challenges there are quite robust. I'm not even sure where he's going to start from. There hasn't been a clear-cut plan or agenda the last 2-3 years. So I'm more confused as to what to even recommend where he starts from, because it's a really chaotic situation. Food prices are going up across the entire country. Farmers can't access their farms, which is largely due to security. Produce are not getting to markets. The value chain is completely broken. People are suffering from exporting some agricultural products.
Investments in mechanized agriculture also. We don't seem to have had a lot of that.
Oh yes. So that's why I said the challenge in the agricultural sector is huge, because it's still largely hoes and cutlasses and not mechanized farming, which doesn't create the kind of jobs and wages that are important to lift people out of poverty. And there has to be a gamut of policy support to actually drive the agricultural sector to tie it to industrialization, to tie it to exports and all of that. And I don't think that can be done in a 1 year period. So he has my sympathies, actually, in the agricultural sector, because I don't know what he's going to do in the next 1 year. Really, trust me, I really don't know. He has my sympathies.
Really, I am just reminded of statements that Nigerian food exports, have basically been banned because of, they found agrochemicals in them, talking about the fact that farmers have not been properly trained on how to use these chemicals, because they have standards when it comes to food that gets imported into their countries, but and when they're subjected to checks, they don't pass those checks. Food leaving Nigeria cannot make it into other countries, and it really got me wondering, what then has been the quality of the food we've been consuming here? Because nobody's really putting any check on these food items. We just consume them without knowing exactly, what's contained in those food items regarding chemicals and harmful substances. But I want us to look at, this situation with our agricultural sector, to consider the irony of the fact that we're coming from, when you look at, pre-colonial era, how we're coming from, an agriculture-based economy to one that has now become dependent on oil, and how much agriculture seems to be regressing in Nigeria despite our huge agricultural potential. And what really the new administration, let's even look forward to 2023 and beyond, what the new administration needs to do to shake that up in the agricultural sector. Mr. Adio.
Okay, listen, there's a whole lot of work that needs to go in the entire value chain of the agricultural sector. And you need probably like a 10-year, 15-year roadmap for you to begin to see some sort of tangible results. First of all, you have to realize that the agricultural market is some sort of a global market, wherein if you rely on the primary products, which is the yams or the cocoas that you produce, you're going to leave your farmers inadvertently poor, because those prices are controlled by an international market, wherein you now have countries in the European Union and United States that used to be our biggest markets also subsidizing their farmers or their local farmers for political reasons. And so once you subsidize the farmers in the international market, it becomes impossible for our local producers to be able to compete in that kind of global environment. And then they end up, getting poorer and poorer over the years. So what we have experienced in the agricultural sector is that while about 11 million people are presently operating in that sector, many of them are operating at the subsistence level, and many of them are extremely poor. So for me, what needs to happen is for us to be able to tie the agricultural sector, first to mechanize it, support it with robust research and development, and then critically tie it down to an industrialization policies that moves us not from the primary products into more processing of these primary products and into industrialization process where we can create meaningful jobs with better wages, better opportunities. We also need to support our export industries. We are the hegemon in the West African region. And rather than importing from Cotonou, Niger, and countries in the sub-region, the Nigerian government should actually be exporting and dominating the markets in the West African region. But for us to do that, we need a set of policy objectives that makes exporting agricultural products or value-added agricultural products easier, cheaper, efficient, and effective. And that has to do with choosing policies wisely and smartly, by first having a clear road plan and a clear agenda And I hope that from 2023, we can have a clear roadmap to fundamentally move the agricultural sector away from the subsistence level into a more mechanized level, tied down to an industrialization policy, and support it with a robust research and development industry from universities and institutes of agriculture, so that we can begin to make sensible progress in that particular sector.
All right. Ms. Ayodele, I also want you to speak on this, one of the things that you mentioned earlier is, not even knowing a lot of these ministers and who they are. And I saw, a couple of the reactions to, this news online. There's a lot of people saying, oh, I'd never even heard about Salim Aman before, or the Nanono name. They're not familiar because they don't seem to have, made a lot of impact. And so talking about impact, do you think, or would you say that these two ministries were the most urgent for the current administration? The newspapers say that, it's maybe a start, and there's other ministries that would also be touched. But do you think that power and agriculture were the most urgent for President Muhammadu Buhari to take action with? Or are there others that, he probably would have also added to this list or started, his reshuffle with?
I just play a very quick joke with you now. Can you in 2 seconds tell me the Minister of Defense, the name of the Minister of Defense?
I was going to say Basham. I normally would know.
So I mean, there are a lot of, I mean, I don't know, there are a lot of ministries that are underperforming, right? The Ministry of Defense is seems like an urgent ministry for me because of the rising insecurity across the country. There's too many bloodletting, too many deaths, too many unavoidable kidnappings. Our schools are so vulnerable. It seems like we don't have a tactical response to anything. There was a news yesterday that 70 children were kidnapped somewhere, I think in Zamfara State or so. 73, yes. We just wake up to bad news every day. And we were supposed to have a Minister of Defense. I mean, so really, I can go on and on all these ministries. Ministry of Education, I'm not sure what is happening at the Ministry of Education. I'm not sure what is happening at the Ministry of Police Affairs. It's just a whole lot of ministries that are quite underperforming, and we can have an entire program, about that. And it's just sad. So when you say that which other ministries are urgent, I think 80% of the ministries are urgent for a change and fresh legs. There are just less than 5, 6, 7 ministers who are really doing the job. And the change is required, in broad scale. Unfortunately, we don't really have enough time. It's just 1 year to go. And I don't know what impact any new minister coming in is going to have in less than a year. I think we've left it too late. We've let the change too late. We're already on the 8th day of the week. And I'm not sure what real difference changing a minister 2-3 months from now will really make in the scheme of things.
Okay, and where would you say the president's mindset is, with a move like this?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Never spoken to the president. I can't even say how his mind works with things like this any longer. But I think in these two ministries, I think because the president seems to have a thing for agriculture, and he's paid attention to that sector, because every time you hear him speak, he talks about farmers and he talks about the agricultural sector. And so I would imagine that he had paid close attention to that ministry, and he hasn't seen the kind of results that he wants to see, and he's probably wielded the big stick. So to that extent, I think he's acted in the ministry that is close to his heart and made a very quick decision. For the power sector, I don't know. I think he probably felt that the minister wasn't doing as much as he had seen when the previous minister, Fashola, was in charge of power, and maybe he needed fresh legs, But it's really hard to tell you what the president thinks on issues like this, because he speaks very less on many of these issues, and it's hard to predict or comment on what he thinks about many of these issues.
So yes, we hear you when you say, it's 2 years, less than 2 years. You won't know exactly what you would achieve in less than 2 years. But the presidency has said that the few cabinet changes, mark the beginning of a total continuous process. So would you finally say better late than never?
Yeah, I think Mr. Adebayo is back. I think I can see him on the screen. Just to point that out. Yeah, better late than never, obviously. Better late than never. But I think the truth is, I'm not sure what you're not going to be able to reinvent the wheel in 1 year. You will not be able to set out a new course, set out a new policy plan, implement it, and achieve anything meaningful in 1 year. Which is why I said initially that except there is a clear policy agenda on ground, and that all the new minister needs to do is to support and implement that plan, and putting a lot more energy and vigor in implementing that sensible idea, you're really not going to achieve anything in 1 year. You just have essentially 1 year to turn the ministry around. Yeah. And I think it's going to be impossible. It's going to be impossible to do.
The People's Democratic Party has also criticized this. They've said that, it's a waste of time, and this, really wouldn't achieve much. So you're not the only one with similar thoughts with regards to this. And then there's also people who have said that, this may not really be because of underperformance. It might just be politics being played here and there. Would you, maybe, buy into those sentiments? Mr. Adio, can you hear us clearly?
Okay, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest with you, politicians are in the trade of playing politics, right? So you shouldn't expect anything less from politicians. It's their trade to play politics, and they make political decisions. It shouldn't surprise us, neither should it shock us, because they are politicians. The only thing is that whatever political decisions that they make, our argument is that it must be in the interest of the Nigerian people, or the majority of the Nigerian people. And that's why in the media and in civil society, we constantly are on their necks to make them make the right decisions and the sensible decisions. And so that even if you want to make political decisions, you should appoint competent people in your political party, or who have political affiliations to your political party, into these positions of authority. So yes, of course, it's a political decision, but we can only hope, and we can only ensure and continue to demand that that political decision that was made is in the interest of the majority of the Nigerian people. And if they do not perform to the extent that we expect, we should also raise our voices to the rooftop to either demand their resignation or also criticize the president, because the buck essentially stops at his tail.
All right. Well, let's move on to something else, and that is defense now. Some of the big stories that we read this morning. One of them that, of course, has been spoken about across the whole country is the kidnap of 73. Some people say up to 100 students in the Zamfara state once again. Now, well, just to also quickly mention, the Minister of Defense is Bashir Magashi. I was right. I just didn't mention Magashi. But let's talk about Zamfara state. One time too many. It feels like clockwork. It feels like it happens every 2 weeks. Once they release a set, they take a new set. What would you say is going on with regards kidnapping in Nigeria?
I think it's a very simple answer, and I think it's the collapse of internal security in our country. Internal policing has failed. And it's been on a downward spiral in the last 30 years. We haven't built a competent police force. We haven't built an internal security architecture that gathers enough local intelligence. We haven't strengthened local governance across our country. And these are the consequences that we're now experiencing today, such that you can move hundreds of children across 100 kilometers distance, and there is not going to be a red flag from any agency to stop or apprehend them. That's a complete failure of internal security architecture. And that is the real problem that we're experiencing in this country. These criminals have now seen that we're extremely vulnerable, especially at the hinterlands, in areas that are close to the forest and in villages, across the fringes between Zamfara, Katsina, Kaduna, and many of these communities that border forests and other countries. So it's a complete failure of internal security. We have not patrolled our borders effectively. We have not trained and retrained our servicemen effectively. And fundamentally, local governance has broken down completely. So you have local government chairmen who have no grip, of their local governments, because they are appointed as cronies by governors and have not been elected by people within that communities, and so they do not have legitimacy to govern. Of course, many of their resources are also used by the governor, and very few is left for them to actually administer. And so that breakdown of governance has led, to a lot of. You go to many of these villages in Zamfara, there's little or no police presence in many of those places. The access roads are completely broken down. No hospitals, no schools. They are left. I refer to them as abandoned communities that are completely left behind. You will think you're not in Nigeria when you go to many of these places, right? And so crime has continued to soar, and the fundamental thing that has happened to kidnapping in our country, however sad it is that for every time we flash on our TV screens that 20 children have been kidnapped and ransom of millions of naira have been paid, what we're doing without knowing is that we're advertising the lucrativeness of the trade of kidnapping. Because one thing that never happens is that these criminals are hardly apprehended, they are hardly prosecuted, they are hardly jailed. So a young, broke, abandoned person in the forest in Zamfara, in Katsina, in Sokoto, in Kebbi, says to himself that there might be an opportunity for me to make millions of naira if I can kidnap, because nobody's going to arrest me and nobody's going to prosecute me.
Indeed, Mr. Adio. Yes, let's bring in Mr. Adebayo now. Mr. Adebayo, can you hear us? Mr. Mark Adebayo. Okay, we'll try to reconnect with Mr. Adebayo. But Mr. Adio, another dimension to this security threats that we've seen is the government and specifically the governor of Zamfara State, Bello Matawalle, urging people to take up arms. So he's saying that the people of the state should come out en masse. They should face the bandits if they come to their village. He says they should not sleep in the night. They should set ambush for these terrorists and bandits, and they should, just get weapons or any weapon they can find and attack these terrorists who come to invade their villages. First of all, is this a realistic call? Because I wonder where, farmers and, mothers and fathers would get arms from, to go ahead and attack bandits. So first of all, is that realistic? And in a functional democracy, should a protest not be the result and the government taking action?
Sorry, I think Mr. Adebayo is back. If you could,
Mr. Adebayo, can you hear us? Mr. Adebayo? Oh, Mr. Adebayo, you can go on, please.
Okay. I think it's an unrealistic thing. Listen, the fundamental constitutional provision and the reason that there exists a government is for the protection of life and properties. The security and welfare of the Nigerian people shall be the fundamental objective of the Nigerian government, without which there actually is no need for government. Because the reason that you need a government in place is for the welfare and security of the Nigerian people. Now, if any government abdicates that responsibility or shies away from that responsibility, it has completely failed and has completely lost legitimacy and has no need and is not fit for purpose to govern. It's as simple as that. Because the alternative is a wild, wild west situation where people now have to arm themselves to defend themselves from criminal elements across the country. And you don't want to have a country where everybody wants to move around with a shotgun or a cutlass or an arm in himself, trying to protect himself or his family. So I think, first of all, at the government level, many of these governors who I feel are not even challenging the president enough is to admit that they have failed the Nigerian people. They have failed in responsibility to protect weak and vulnerable vulnerable citizens, and they should take that responsibility very seriously. The Nigerian citizens do not have the capacity to protect themselves from criminals who are wielding AK-47s. So I think it's a pipe dream, and I think it's sad, if not embarrassing, that we'll be urging innocent farmers to defend themselves from criminals who are clearly armed with superior weaponry, who are taking over villages, who are killing people in their tens and in their hundreds to now defend themselves against those people. I think it's sad, and I choose my words carefully. It's borderline irresponsible, because you cannot expect, I mean, what are you going to do against an AK-47 wielding bandit or kidnapper or terrorist? There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. You're bringing a knife to a gunfight. And it makes no sense that a government that we pay taxes to, that we pledge allegiance to, will be throwing it back to us to say we should protect ourselves when they move around in SUVs with security escorts everywhere, where their children are getting education outside this country, when their families are highly protected, when they live in high-gated estates, highly policed and protected, and we are faded and banded to the Philistines. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous, and we cannot accept this. It's their job and it's their responsibility to protect the Nigerian people, and it's ridiculous to even imagine that we should be having the conversation that the Nigerian people should protect themselves. It makes no sense and must not be accepted or tolerated in our democracy. No sense.
Adio, I'm guessing that the failure that you've mentioned now, where you pointed out that a government that has failed in that regard, of that very, very fundamental requirement of governance, and should be able to own up, and agree that they have failed. And I'm guessing that covers the state and federal and local level of governance. Okay.
Yes, top to bottom.
Okay.
Top to bottom.
Mark Adebayo, can you hear us?
I've been hearing you all along.
Well, for some reason we couldn't hear you. I apologize for your power situation. It seems the power is off again. But I want to bring you back with regards to the incident in Zamfara, the kidnap of 73 or 100 students once again that has taken place. And I will say, I'm going to ask you on something that I had mentioned earlier, the seemingly invisibility, or it doesn't seem like a lot of these security agencies exist in those locations. The DSS, the Nigerian police, the SWAT, like they were mentioned. You remember at the end of the EndSARS protest, there was something called SWAT. Yeah. The NSCDC, every single level of security, it doesn't seem to exist in Zamfara. And why does it look that way, that 100 people can be taken 100 kilometers away and there's no resistance anywhere?
One of the things that we have to... Can you hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay, now, there seems to be a collapse of government. There seems to be a total collapse of governance structures in this country, and it's quite unfortunate. We are critically tending towards a state failure, because it is unheard of, it is unthinkable that we can be going through this circle again and again and again. Kidnappings of school children every day, every time. These days, anytime I or any member of my family wants to travel and they have to, where they are going, it cannot be done by air, it's going to be by road. My heart is always in my mouth until they get there and I know they have arrived safely, and until they reach safely, especially when my children are going back to school. You understand? So it's like that's why when I was mentioning minister that ought to go, I mentioned the first minister first. The health minister ought to go because of the mismanagement of the health situation. The information minister has to go because of this misinformation. The internal affairs minister has to go. The police have all these people is whole gamut. Now let me tell you, we were discussing. I was hearing Mr. Adio discussing about the issue of the policy trust in the area of agriculture. Now there is no magic. I do not envy the current minister of agriculture. I don't envy him because there is a policy clash, there is a policy crisis, there is a policy anarchy. Now, the policy of the presidency is directly conflicts with the whatever agricultural policy that you have. Once the president is saying that he's going to continue with the open grazing policy, there is no miracle. There is no magic that anybody who is an agriculture minister will be able to perform, because the food prices will still continue to rise, because farmers will not be able to sell their farms. These killer others will still continue to go there and kill them, because the president says he wants open grazing, which is antithetical to the agricultural development of this country. And you know that the oil will soon go. The oil will soon go. I don't know whether we can still have oil, or oil will be marketable in the international market in the next 20 years. So we have to fall back on agriculture. And for as long as you allow open grazing policy, we will never get it right in the area of agriculture, no matter how good the Minister of Agriculture is. So that is one thing we have to know. When the government is unable to protect its people, when the government has lost the legitimate use of force to protect the people, we are turning towards state failure. If bandits or criminals can just walk into the Nigerian Defense Academy to kill people, if bandits can drive bomb into the police headquarters and bomb it, and who is going to protect us? If our security agencies have... the Katsina state government came out to say, defend yourself. He's telling the people to defend yourself. The Zamfara state government came out to say, defend yourself. Now, but when the Benue state government, Samuel Otom, said the same thing about a year ago, the federal government came hard on him. Now the government is saying that I can no longer protect you, go and protect yourself. And that is going to lead to terrible, because if you say I should protect myself, it's either I go and get a pump action or I go and get a AK-47 by myself. If bandits and criminals and kidnappers and terrorists can have access to weapons, then the free citizens also have to have weapons. If the government is telling me to go and protect myself, it takes a good guy with the gun, to defend himself against the bad guy with the gun. And we should not allow that thing to spiral out of control. It's unfortunate that we have failure of governance. Now, the president can sack the ministers. Who is going to sack the president? Who is going to sack the president?
And what do you think?
The president himself needs to be sacked. That is the bitter truth.
And in a situation where these bandits are apprehended, and then the military says they have surrendered, that they are now repentant, and they reintegrate them into society, they forgive them, where does that leave our anti-terrorism war?
That is one of the things I wrote in my column last week. Nowhere in the world, nowhere in the issue of terrorism has any terrorist ever repented. There is no repentant terrorist anywhere. What they do is that they deceive you that they are repentant. Look, all those people, they say they are repentant Boko Haram members who are now in the city. You can see the upsurge in Boko Haram attacks now. That is because those people they release into the society are gathering intelligence real time and sending back same to their commanders in the bushes. That is why you are seeing the upsurge. You understand? That's why ISWAP is gaining ground now. You are releasing terrorists who have killed people, who have maimed, who have raped, who have displaced millions of Nigerians. Displaced many millions of Nigerians. You said they are repentant. Remember that general that came on here to say that a repentant Boko Haram stands a chance to become the president of Nigeria. How ludicrous, how ludicrous that statement can be. And those are the people who are managing our security. You are encouraged, you say a Boko Haram, a repentant Boko Haram can be. That's why they have one of them in government now. A confirmed sympathizer of terrorism. Bim is now the one managing my data and your data and everything about you and me, about this country today. So, we should not shy away from the truth. It is quite unfortunate, and the other thing I need to tell Nigerians is that the regular Nigerians like us, we should know that we should never allow ourselves to be used against one another by these leaders in the area of religion or ethnicity. Nigerians should know that poverty does not have ethnicity, does not have religion. Insecurity does not have ethnicity or religion. We must never play the religious card. We must never play the ethnicity card. We must come together and make sure that we find peace. In fact, let's forget about even blaming anybody anymore. Let us find a way. Let that be a massive action in terms of finding peace, solution to our problems, to our common problems. All these people that are in the higher places, they are protecting themselves. Never allow anybody to use religion or ethnicity, to determine how you respond to national issues. And I think Nigerians must know that. We must know that. We are divided enough. No more division. Let us come together and find common solution to our issues. That is my message directed to Nigerians this morning.
Marco Debayo, thank you very much for staying with us all through the discussion this morning. Once again, apologies for your power situation, but we thank you for still, joining the conversation. Ayodele Adio, the Managing Director of the Avalon Daily, thank you also for your time and for speaking with us on these very important issues.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thursday morning, and this is where we will be wrapping up the discussions on the breakfast this morning. If you missed out, remember where to catch up. It's simply at PlusTvAfrica on Facebook and Instagram. Same with our YouTube channel, at PlusTvAfrica, and we have a second YouTube
Yes, it's
channel.
at PlusTvAfrica Lifestyle. I am Anetta Felix.
And I am Osaogie Ogbon.
Have a beautiful September.
Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Welcome to your favorite program, The Moment of Truth, brought to you by the Citadel Global Community Church. Our God is a God of salvation, far above all principality and power, and might and dominion, that regardless of what happens in this season, you will escape. Say to your neighbor, there is no peace for the wicked. The lazy man does not rouse what he took in hunting, but diligence is a man's precious possession. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might.
Moment of Truth with Pastor Tunde Bakare, Sundays, 7 p.m. on Plus TV Africa.
for upcoming artists to blow in Nigeria.
Welcome to Plus Trending. I am Bookie November, your host, saying thank you for joining us on today's episode.
Welcome back. It's tea time on Plus TV Africa.
Practice makes perfect. I'm not perfect yet, but I'm a lot better than I used to be.
He's a king. He's entitled to marry 100 if he wants to.
It is engagement we need to have.
Those who suffer miscarriages are never taken into account.
Members of the National Assembly are also influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the barbing, I pay my rent. On the barbing, I send my children to school.
A consultative engagement.
No any tangible notification before they ban us.
It's one thing for people to be at your back and the heat of the moment, and another thing for them to still be with you when push comes to shove.
I will do everything to take Lagos out of the national grid.
Thanks for joining us on Plus News Brief. I am Osaogie Ogbonwa. President Muhammadu Buhari says due to periodic self-reviews, more members of his cabinet may be made to leave. This is as he explained that the significant review steps are meant to identify and strengthen weak areas, close gaps, build cohesion and synergy in governance, manage the economy, and improve the delivery of public good to Nigerians. Buhari's announcement was contained in a statement on Wednesday by his special advisor on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, titled, President Buhari Approves Cabinet Reshuffle. In a statement to cabinet members during the Federal Executive Council meeting on Wednesday, the president approved a reshuffle in his cabinet, which has so far run since August 21st, 2019.
A few changes, marking the beginning of a continuous process, have been approved. They are as follows. Ministers leaving the cabinet. 1. Mohammed Sabo Nanono, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. And 2, Engineer Salim Aman, Minister of Power. Redeployment. 1. Dr. Muhammad Mahmoud Abubakar, Minister of Environment, to assume office as the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. 2. Engineer Abubakar D. Aliyu, Minister of State, Works and Housing, assumes office as the Minister of Power. In due course, substantive nominations will be made to fill the consequential vacancies in accordance with the requirements of the Constitution.
Bandits who were in large numbers have stormed Government Day Secondary School, Kaya, in Maradun local government area of Zamfara State and kidnapped over 100 students. Zamfara State Governor Bello Matawalle, who hails from Maradun and an indigene of the area, Malam Abu Kaya, said the bandits arrived at the school at about 11 a.m. on Wednesday when the school was in session. He stressed that although the number of kidnapped students was yet to be known, the victims would be more than 100. Meanwhile, the Zamfara State Governor Bello Matawalle has ordered the immediate closure of the primary and secondary schools in the state following the abduction of a yet-to-be-ascertained number of students in the state. Zamfara State Commissioner of Police Ayuba Elkanah conveyed the governor's directive while addressing journalists on the new security measures in the state. The Zamfara State government's decision is indefinite, the commissioner added during the briefing in Gusau. When asked how many students were abducted, the Commissioner of Police said, "I don't know." The government also restricted movement from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in 13 local government areas, but for Gusau, the capital, movement restriction will be from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. And the presidency has condemned Amnesty International's latest salvo on Nigeria, regretting that they have decided to side with terrorists before the liberty of those they injure, displace, and murder. Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, made the government's position known in a statement on Wednesday in Abuja. The presidency was reacting to Amnesty International's recent claim that the federal government is harassing its critics and other militias. The presidential aide, however, dismissed the allegation, saying the government would continue to fight terrorism with all the means it has at its disposal, no matter the criticism it faces for doing so. According to him, Amnesty International has no legal right to exist in Nigeria, saying it must open a formal investigation into the personnel that occupy their Nigerian offices. And the day when open grazing is supposed to stop in southern Nigeria is here, but only a few states have enacted laws to that effect. This could be as a result of the division the issue has caused between North and the South. PlusTvAfrica's Jacinta Obuku reports.
Forum set a timeline of Wednesday, the 1st of September 2021 for the promulgation of the anti-grazing law in all its member states. Anti-open grazing law.
The governors of Nigeria's 17 southern states resolving to ban open grazing across the region by September the 1st. September the 1st has come and 6 states, Bayelsa, Rivers, Oyo, Ekiti, Abia and Ondo have complied with the decision to enact the law banning open grazing of cattle. Governor Oluwarotimi Akeredolu of Ondo State signed his state anti-open grazing bill into law on Tuesday. The government did not return PlusTvAfrica's request for an interview. Fewer issues have divided southern Nigeria and Abuja as much as the plan to ban open grazing. Analysts believe that could be a reason why most states in the region are yet to walk the talk. In Imo State, Governor Hope Uzodinma recently said a law has been in existence since 2006 that ensures farmers and herders live together in peace. This has brought a lot of controversial reactions, but the governor believes his statement was grossly misinterpreted, and the State Commissioner for Information explains.
This prohibited grazing of cattle in restricted areas like residential areas, commercial areas, and so on. But then there are still some areas that are not covered by the law. So what the government did was to bring the herders and farmers in Imo State to a roundtable discussion, and they agreed on modalities to coexist peacefully, and it's working for us. What is important is that there is peace in the state between the two groups. I don't see how that contradicts any other thing.
Some herders consider the collective decision to ban open grazing in southern Nigeria a bad idea, but the Mieti Allah Cattle Breeders Association has on its own asked for more time so that they can put alternative plans in place. The rest of Nigeria now has to wait to see what happens if cattle stray into states with the law already in place. Jacinta Obuku for PlusTvAfrica.
Still on Plus News Brief, in a stakeholders meeting which was held in Borno State, seeking ways on how to deal with the repentant insurgents took center stage. Leaders in the state welcomed repented terrorists. However, Opunabo Inkotaria is one of those who think it is folly to embrace such an idea. Plus TV Africa's Miri Ebopo tells us more.
Traditional leaders in Borno State agreed to the return of repentant Boko Haram terrorists into their communities. The news has generated a lot of views from Nigerians. Opunabo Inkotaria, a public affairs analyst who was a guest on the breakfast on Plus TV Africa, says it is irrational to grant Boko Haram terrorists amnesty without any punishment, as it will breed impunity.
To me, it is not only irreason, but the height of insanity to ever think that these terrorists are going to or should be forgiven for the sins committed without necessarily any penalty, because that will definitely encourage impunity.
Opunabo alleges that traditional leaders in Borno State are acting on the orders of the political class, and the release of every captive by Boko Haram terrorists should be the only condition to grant amnesty.
I don't think the leaders in Borno State are the ones calling for amnesty, calling for forgiveness. Probably the governor. And definitely the traditional rulers might not want to go against the governor for fear of being dethroned. You know, most of these are governors as tyrants. So I sincerely disagree.
A security expert, retired Major Banjo Daniel, says traditional rulers are the closest to the masses, and it is a dangerous trend to agree to the idea of granting amnesty to Boko Haram. He says giving them amnesty is not the solution. Rather, they should be made to go through the justice system of Nigeria.
I do not think it is a good idea. And in fact, it is appalling that the traditional rulers, who are supposed to be the fathers of the masses, in especially the last tier of government, the local government and wards, because these traditional rulers are, my own area, we call them Bale or Bas, you know, and the leaders. You know, they're the most close to the masses in every part of Nigeria.
Meanwhile, the spokesman of Borno Elders Forum, Bulama Mali Gubio, opposes the idea of community leaders consenting to grant amnesty to Boko Haram terrorists. Mercy Boko for Plus TV Africa.
Still in the news, the senator representing Kaduna Central, Uba Sani, has urged the federal government to decentralize the police force and encourage community policing to tackle banditry, insecurity, and others bedeviling the state and the country at large. He stated this when he paid condolence to Senator Bala Nala in Kaduna over the death of his son. Sani says efforts must be put in place to ensure and to end insecurity, as nowhere is safe for citizens to live, while calling on government to double effort to put an end and fish out the perpetrators. Also reacting, Senator Bala Ibn Nala says the wrong prescription to insecurity in the country is more dangerous, noting that the correct antidote is to fish out the culprits. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Union of Journalists, Kaduna State Correspondent Chapel, expressed worry over the unfortunate incidents, saying citizens can't walk freely as nowhere is safe.
Discussion which is dangerous to me, which I have seen so far, is for politicians to attempt to politicize the issue of security. Security is much more than that. Our issue has been evolutionary. Evolutionary in the sense that in a long time we took so many things for granted and unwittingly created the situation that we are in today. Policemen were not willing to enforce the laws of this country. Customs were ready to compromise at the border and allow the importation of things that ordinarily should not be here. Immigration were ready to compromise and bring people who have no business being in this country. Those in charge of security were equally willing to say. It became a norm that once there is money, anything is possible. That is on the part of territorial protection. Internally, leaders became so obsessed with power, and therefore law was divided into two. One for the leaders and the other for the followers.
This clearly shows to us that we need to put our political differences aside and focus on how the government would solve this problem of insecurity in our country. Because this young man is an innocent person living in his house, but for some people to come to his house, murder him and leave the house, and up to this moment the security have not been able to track those people that committed this very terrible crime. Is something that everybody in this country will be worried. Of course, I also express my condolence to the family and the father, like I said, who is also going to work closely together to ensure that incidents like this do not happen again in our own country.
Was killed by unknown gunmen in his home. We pray that this kind of incidents do not occur again because it's becoming very worrisome. The thing is, we don't even know what happened next. We are just there. So we are calling on the federal government, the state government, all government concerned, and other security personnel to please double their efforts in tackling insecurity in the whole country.
The United Nations Women Nigeria has decried the high rate of human trafficking in Nigeria, attributing it to high rate of unemployment in the country. It also warned the government to build shelter for the return of victims of trafficking. Program analyst of UN Women, Aminat Stokpe, made this known in Abuja at the workshop organized by Clean Foundation in collaboration with United Nations Women. The theme was Methodology Workshop on Gender Audit Tool Development for the Assessment of Protection Services and Shelters on Forced Migration and Human Trafficking in the FCT. She urged governments at all levels to enforce stiffer laws against human trafficking to prevent consistent death and slavery of Nigerians.
So it's a methodology workshop on gender audit and why gender audit clean with the support from the UN Women, implemented several interventions that are aimed at unraveling all the problems associated with trafficking in persons in Edo and Lagos states. The outcome was revealing. Part of the problem reviewed, or part of the challenges reviewed, are all the issues associated with lack of adequate parental care and even the criminality. Okay, chains of criminals that benefit from these illegal activities, including parents.
If they receive appropriate counseling and guidance, and if they are empowered after coming back, they may not go back into that trafficking. And that's why we're doing this gender audit of shelters and gender audit of service providers of service protection services in Abuja. Because if you're able to do appropriate counseling, if you're able to provide them with the required services when they return, if you're able to empower them, if you're able to make them see reasons why they should not go back, that is, if you make them see reasons why they need to stay in the country.
Human trafficking issues should be added to educational curriculums by, of course, the relevant stakeholders, the experts, so that from young ages, even if it's not possible from primary institutions, it should be from secondary, so that from a young age, a young person or a child would be well informed about what human trafficking is, the ills of human trafficking, and how human trafficking contributes to the decadence of our society. I think this will go a long way in helping to solve the problem of human trafficking.
And now to stories in other parts of Africa. Egypt says it plans to manufacture 1 billion doses a year of China's Sinovac vaccine, claiming it would become the Middle East and Africa's biggest vaccine producer. Health Minister Hala Zaid told the press conference that under the deal with the Chinese pharmaceutical company, a factory in Cairo would produce more than 200 million doses per year to cover national needs. Zaid added that a second factory will produce 3 million doses per day, or around 1 billion a year, with a view to exporting the vaccine for COVID-19 and responding to demand in Africa. And moving outside Africa now, the Colombian Navy says it has seized 1.8 tons of cocaine being transported on board a semi-submersible vessel in the South Pacific. The operation prevented the trafficking and consumption of more than 44.5 million doses of cocaine in neighboring countries, valued at $60 million and distributed by the FARC's dissident group Bloque Occidental Alfonso Cano. The seizure, led by the Marines, was carried out with intelligence from the Colombian Navy. Still outside Africa, the United States is looking at all possible options and routes to continue helping Americans and legal permanent residents leave Afghanistan. U.S. Under Secretary of State Victoria Nuland told the news briefing on Wednesday night. Nuland also said the United States would continue to have conversations with the Taliban that serve U.S. interests as well as those of U.S. allies.
With the Taliban, we had it during the effort that we were trying to midwife a negotiation. Those conversations have continued intensively to enable the evacuation of that we undertook and to try to get the kinds of guarantees of safe passage, et cetera, and tolerance, and to talk about the standards set in the UN Security Council resolution, to talk about the terrorist threat as well, because the expectation is that they claim to be able to control the security of Afghanistan. We'll see if that is the case. That is a far cry from formal recognition. We will continue to have conversations that serve our interest, as will our allies and partners. But the first thing we want to see is them live up to the obligations that they have under the UN Charter, as well as the public statements that they themselves have made about their expectation for an Afghanistan that respects human rights, respects international law, allows international citizens and Afghans who wish to leave.
And to business news now. President Muhammadu Buhari has asked a new board of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority to make more investments that support economic diversification, as global oil prices are projected to drop to around $40 per barrel by 2030. He gave the charge on Wednesday at the inauguration of the third NSIA board in Abuja, shortly before he chaired a virtual meeting of the Federal Executive Council.
Following the recommendation of the National Economic Council, and with the approval of His Excellency Mr. President, the current board was appointed. This group of distinguished professionals before you today, Your Excellency, have been assembled as the new board of directors to play a part in contributing towards the administration's agenda of bolstering our economy and broadening the nation's basket of activities beyond oil. In the main, the board will, on behalf of the Nigerian people, guide and oversee the NSIA management activities towards delivering outcomes that will transform the fortunes of our country. Using the NSIA Act as a guide, the board will be required to superintend over initiatives that meet the current and future needs of Nigerians. On our part, as government, we will continue to support the authority with the necessary policies and framework to ensure that the mission of the institution is delivered in a transparent, sustainable, and inclusive manner.
Well aware that this is a very huge task as a board. The previous board has set a very high bar. Some of the impactful projects that are being executed still need to be completed. We're also well aware of the funding challenges that the government is facing. And so our plan is to ensure that we continue to push forward the projects that the previous board, under the guidance and directives of Mr. President, complete in a very economical and efficient manner. So for us, that is the assurance we'd like to give Mr. President, that we will continue to push on those infrastructure projects, those social impactful projects, and all other projects that will further enhance the economic well-being of Nigeria.
To entertainment news now, Hollywood actress Angelina Jolie says she hopes to empower children around the world with tools to fight back for their rights with a book she has written with Amnesty International. Know Your Rights and Claim Them, written by human rights lawyer Geraldine Van Buren, one of the original drafters of the 1989 UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, aims to equip kids with the knowledge to safely challenge injustices. Jolie, who is a special envoy for UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, said she hoped the book would also remind governments of their commitments to the global treaty enshrining children's civil, social, political, and economic rights.
I put up the rights of a child for my children, right? It was we were homeschooling at the time, and I put it up, and it was a kind of reminder of, okay, you can go through things in life, and you can be reminded, this is who you are, this is your value, these are your rights. And as time would go on, and within different broken systems and within America, it was explained to me, well, they don't really have access to those rights. And that infuriated me and made me start to question, what does that mean? Why? Why don't they? For each country, what is it, this idea of you have the right to an education? Well, all right, but then why is it so many children are out of school? Why is it the girls in Afghanistan are being harmed if they go? Why are people making their girls marry off and denying them that? What is happening?
And that's News Brief. For more, please follow us at PlusTvAfrica on Facebook and Instagram. And do subscribe to our YouTube channel at PlusTvAfrica and PlusTvAfrica Lifestyle. I am Osao Gie Ogbon. Thanks for watching.